kindness doesn't take more than you can give. Kindness doesn't leave you up in the middle of the night wondering like, should I have done that? Like, because now I don't have enough to feed my family, right? That's not kind. And so setting healthy boundaries to me is kindness. I suffer from clinical depression, so I go in and out of waves, right? It was a marriage. It wasn't just, oh, I am stronger than any mental illness, like,
right.
None of us are stronger than a mental illness. Come on. The act of kindness itself, when it brings you delight, that's when I call it kindness. When it's something you have to do, well, then it's a duty, then it's your job.
Today, I am joined by Nicole Phillips. She is an author, podcast host. She hosts the Kindness Podcast, and she has authored 3 books on the subject of kindness. Kindness is Contagious is her first book. Then she came out with Kindness is Courageous. And her most recent book is The Negativity Remedy, which are all about how you can concretely inject kindness into your life and find fulfillment and happiness through these acts of kindness. So we're going to talk to her today, and we're really excited. And she was most recently listed as number 3 on Oprah's list of happiness podcasts, the best happiness podcast out there. So we're really excited to have her wisdom on the show, and hope you guys will enjoy. So take care.
I was in Southeastern Ohio 4 years ago, living there in Athens, Ohio, and I had written a book called Kindness is Contagious, and it's just 100 stories to remind you that God is good and so are most people, right? It's just little short stories. And so I was being interviewed by someone at WOUB Public Media. And when I was done with the interview, this man, his name is Tom Hodson, and he said, Nicole, is there anything that I can do for you? And it was just the way that he stopped and looked me in the eye and really like created this opening for me to just be honest with him. It was really beautiful. And so he said that to me, and I looked at him and I said, I don't know. I said, I've always wanted to do a radio show. And he smiled and he goes, well, how about a podcast? Because we're building our little podcast family here, expanding it out. Would you like to do a kindness podcast? And I said, I have no idea how to do that. I haven't even listened to a podcast, so I have no idea, but yeah, I would love that. And so that was really where it began. We just called it the Kindness Podcast. And I got to interview people who are either experts in the field of kindness or people whose lives have been changed by kindness, or people who just have a really cool story. So it really is kind of whatever, but the central theme around it is kindness. 10 years ago, I was on the edge of what anyone would call an alcoholic. So a drinker, a smoker, an overeater. I was living in Fargo, North Dakota at the time, and was really depressed and was self-medicating in a lot of different ways. And I had an experience, an act of kindness, and it kind of just lit my insides on fire. Like, whoa, like that felt amazing. And in that particular situation, I was the giver of kindness, but it was just, I don't know. I feel like I'd been kind before, and it never really kind of lit me up like that. And so in that particular moment, I just thought, I want to chase this feeling. I want to know what this is about. And so I started writing a newspaper column, and it was a weekly column. It's called Kindness is Contagious. And I just actually stopped writing it a month ago, retired the column after 10 years of writing about kindness. And they weren't my stories. Some were my stories, but primarily I just asked people to send in their stories of kindness, things they had done and how it made them feel, or times when kindness showed up just when they needed it. And I got to kind of write and craft stories around those stories and put them in the newspaper every week. And so then eventually it ended up running in North Dakota and Minnesota, and for a little while in South Dakota as well. And so the first book that I put together, Kindness is Contagious, is a compilation of some of those newspaper stories. And so the first book is Kindness is Contagious, 100 stories to remind you God is good and so are most people. The second one is Kindness is Courageous, 100 stories to remind you that people are brave and kind. And then the third book is called The Negativity Remedy. And basically, after being intentional about kindness for 1 year, I noticed radical changes in my life. And I'm talking about, I totally quit drinking, quit smoking, lost 30 pounds, refell in love with my husband. The whole dynamic of my home changed within a year of being intentional about kindness. And so the negativity remedy is really my effort at putting down best practices, things that went right, things that went wrong, and sharing that with people in case they wanted to try it for themselves. Perhaps the opposite of kindness might be indifference, that someone needs an encouraging word and we just don't notice them, or we are too busy in ourselves, or we are fearful of talking to a stranger. I'll look at pictures of myself when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I think, I didn't care about getting dirty. I didn't care what I was wearing and whether my shoes, matched the pants and the shirt. And I didn't care about who was around me as long as we could have fun. Right. And somewhere along the way, I grew up and I decided that people could be scary. And so sometimes that's the reason why I hold back from kindness. It's fear. And actually, when I surveyed people for the negativity remedy, I asked them, what holds you back from kindness? And they said, fear. Like one guy said, well, I'm from New Jersey. And so, that's
You're not allowed to be kind in Jersey, right?
That's a whole nother issue. But for the rest of them, it was fear. They were worried that someone would come back and want more than they could give.
Being taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm. They were worried that that somebody would take it wrong, like they were pitying them. There was also fear that somebody would just, no, I don't want your kindness. I don't, just leave me alone, kind of, that they would be really disgruntled with them. And I get it, because I've had all of those things happen to me when I've tried to be kind. And yet, you know what? I'm still here. I'm still standing. Right. None of those things cut me down so far that I decided kindness wasn't worth it, because the benefit to me is worth the risk.
Yeah. And we don't necessarily have, it almost is more of the defense mechanism rather than reality. So the scenarios you come up in your mind are fictional. Yes, there's a possibility it could happen, but there's the lack of not doing it doesn't, I guess, like you said, you want to get the benefits. You don't get anything, but I think of the Wayne Gretzky quote, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so you can't really gain anything by not doing it, but we spend so much time not doing things that we know could be really healthy for us. How did you start? Did you just, because you said that almost kind of overwhelming maybe to start something that you haven't done. This would be something maybe new or overwhelming or challenging. Did you dive right into kind of the kindness, or was it like once you had that one kindness experience, it just allowed you to just go crazy with it? Or did you really have to kind of think about a little bit more systematically in terms of being kind?
It was pretty systematic for me, because I had been a television anchor in Fargo, North Dakota. And so when I stopped to raise my kids, the publisher of the newspaper called me and said, we're looking for female voices. Would you write for us? And he said, do you want to write about cooking? Do you want to write about politics? Do you want to write about raising kids? And I was like, no, I'm not, none of that sounds fun to me. Bleh. And he said, well, when you figure out what you want to write about, you call me. And so that was when I had this experience with a young mom, and ended up, giving her some money to fill a gas tank and take her kid to McDonald's. I wasn't in a position where I changed her life, but that one act of kindness changed my day so much that I wanted to chase after it. And so I wrote, I called the publisher of the newspaper I wrote down the first story ever and I sent it to him. And I said, this is what I want to write about. I want to write about kindness and I want people to send in their stories. And he said, all right, let's give it a shot. And they gave me a weekly column. So the problem, Doug, with writing a weekly column is that you have to write it, guess how often?
Daily.
Yeah, well, every week. You're going to have to write your weekly column like every single week. And so,
And you have to have good acts of kindness to draw from every,
right? And so I might get these daily emails from people, or I might not get emails from people sharing their stories with me, but I always had to have something prepped and ready to go for my deadline. So I became really intentional and really systematic about seeing the kindness around me. So whether I found an opportunity to be the giver, whether I was the receiver, and this happened a lot, I was the receiver in ways that I never would have noticed before. Just,
do you have like an example?
The natural ebb and flow of things, like if I'm at the grocery store and someone says, oh, you only have a few items, go in front of me. Yeah. That might have happened 1,000 times before. And I was like, okay, that just makes practical sense. I only have a few things. You have a lot of things. I'm going to go first. Right. Well, when you look at everything through the lens of kindness, you realize like that person didn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. They noticed me. They noticed the situation that I was in and they preferred me over themselves. Right. So that's kindness. I was receiving it all the time and I didn't even know it. And then aside from being the giver or the receiver, I also became really good at becoming a witness to kindness. So I could see, looking down, if we're still in the grocery store, I could see looking down the aisle of the grocery store, the teenage boy who helps an elderly woman reach something from the top shelf. And I was like, oh, wow. So then I just really would think about those things and try to create kind of a dialogue around why that particular act of kindness was meaningful and the purpose behind it. And so that's why I think it was so life-changing for me, is because I had to see, as the giver, the receiver, or the witness, kindness all around me.
So do you think that focus, although it helped your news article or your weekly article, did you see change in your life from always, because now there's all elements of positive thinking. I'm looking for positives in my life instead of maybe where my mindset was, look at all the bad in the world, which I would imagine being a news anchor before it was filled with, man, I have to report that must be awful. And it can kind of have that secondary depression or trauma effect on it of I have to keep reporting all these bad things.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head. Once I had my children, I didn't want to go back into that newsroom and report on all these terrible things that were happening. It was just draining. So I never knew what mindfulness was when I started this kindness journey 10 years ago. But after talking with people who are kind of experts in the field of mindfulness, they'll say to me, that's what you trained yourself to do. And was to be more mindful and to control your thoughts. And so what I found was by using that lens of kindness, I really moved my eyes off of myself and what was my own pity party and the things that were maybe not so great in my life. Yeah. And I turned them on. I focused my eyes on other people and other situations and noticed the good happening around me. And there are feel-good chemicals, 4 feel-good chemicals that are released into the body, whether you are the giver, the receiver, or the witness of an act of kindness. And I felt them. So it's not just a hypothetical, well, maybe it would work. Like there's some physiological evidence that shows that kindness really does change the body. And once I changed, my whole home changed.
What was it about that initial experience at the gas station that, because you said you've been kind in the past, but what was it about this one event or experience that was just so powerful for you that transformed your life pretty much?
I think it was just a matter of me being so ungrateful at that point in my life. Like I was depressed and, I suffer from clinical depression. So I go in and out of waves. Throughout my life, I have gone in and out of waves of things. And I know at that point in my time, in my life, I had 3 beautiful, healthy kids. I lived in a nice house. I had a husband who was very good to me. And yet life just felt so passionless. And so I felt like I had to take care of my kids. I have to do the laundry. I have to do the dishes. I have to take them to the swimming pool. It never occurred to me that I get to do any of those things. And so this young mom that I met, her whole being was just in a spot of joy when I met her, that she got to spend the day with her little girl. Mm-hmm. And so just, having a quick conversation with her led me to say, I want to help her. I want to do something to make her day a little bit better, because she just made my day a little bit better. And I don't even know how she did it, And so, I kind of felt this voice deep inside me saying, give her some money. And so I did. And it was not like we had ever, spent time together after that. This was not an ongoing relationship. It was a one-time thing. And yet I got back into my car feeling like I owned the world, just this absolute, like the blinders were off. And I thought, I am powerful and I am purposeful. And I don't know that I had ever felt a calling, and that I was powerful and purposeful in my job as a mom. I just kind of felt like it's a duty. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to turn that into this idea that, wow, there is more to each day than just getting up, putting on your shoes, doing the laundry, whatever tasks you have. There are gems hidden throughout the day, and those gems are kindness.
So I'm also hearing that you had a perspective change maybe with your discussion with this lady, because you probably maybe initially saw her as being somebody that's suffering because of low income, not having a lot of resources, and yet you saw happiness and joy of her present experience despite not having all the riches and resources available. That almost it creates the perspective of, regardless of my situation, I can make it different than, or I can make it what I want it to be.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And it absolutely occurred to me in that moment. Wait a minute. This woman has fewer resources, a smaller support system than I have. And yet she's enjoying this day. What's my problem with that? Right. And when I speak to people, I often show them a piece of paper, and it's a white piece of paper. And in the middle is a little black dot. Do you see a little black dot there? Yeah. And so, when I ask people, what do you see? They'll say, I see a black dot, or, a circle, or a hole into an alternate universe, whatever. But people never mention the white space. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was. I was looking at the black dots, the cancer diagnosis, any financial troubles, fight with my husband, anything that I would put in the category of negative or taking away my energy. Those were all my black dots.
Right.
And I could see those very clearly. But the idea of the perspective shift is just that we move our eyes off of the black dots and onto the white space, because our life has both. It has the black dots and it has the white space. And the white space is the place where friendship lives, where laughter lives, where creativity lives, free time just to do whatever you want, like yummy ice cream, all of that is part of the white space. And that's where I had to begin to train myself to live.
Yeah. And you became more present, I would imagine. And then going back to that mindfulness, it was just present awareness of, that white space probably represents the present and opportunity, and the black dot represents, the things that are in the past, or, I can't do anything about at this point.
Or other people's actions that you can't do anything about, and I want to just pause though and say that it's really easy for me to say, I live in the white space, life is great.
Right.
I still wrestle with clinical depression and anxiety. So I still feel, to me, it's like a dark cloud that comes in, or it's a punch in the gut, or it's kind of like this squirrel running around in my chest, all those sorts of different things, depending on, the moment or the day. And so if someone is feeling that way, I can just say, for me, I had to get on medication. I had to do what I could do to help myself be healthy, along with the perspective change, right? It was a marriage. It wasn't just, oh, I am stronger than any mental illness,
right.
None of us are stronger than a mental illness. Come on.
Well, it was kind of leading me into my next question, which was, our brain has a negative bias. We tend to pay more attention to the negative out of survival. I mean, there's a good reason for it, because if we don't pay attention to the negative, I tell my staff all the time, our brain prefers to look at every snake as a rattler than to look at every snake as a garter snake. It just helps protect us. So you actually have to consciously figure out a way to consciously engage in that positive experience, especially if you're in that state where you're depressed. Because if you're depressed, then your brain is really good at looking at the negative, and it's going to feel uncomfortable to see things in a positive way. So it does take a lot of effort and a lot of perseverance to stick with it. Because I would imagine even in your efforts, even though that one experience was so powerful, that there were many moments where you got kind of maybe hit in the face with something, or you got maybe tired or exhausted or overwhelmed, and it made it harder to do what you were trying to do. Could you speak a little about bumps in the journey of sticking with kindness, and thoughts about how you deal with that, or how you kind of not get completely thrown off the road?
Yes, I was dealing with kindness really well. It was my superpower for about 5 years. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And most of the days I was pretty good at dealing with breast cancer, knowing that if this was something I was going to walk through, then it was certainly something that I would use to help another person someday. Yeah. However, I didn't wake up that way every day, right? And so on those days when I felt like I had nothing to give, that I was completely tapped out, emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually, whatever, those were the days when, for me, kindness had to become something that was kind of like rote memorization. So for instance, I would go to the gas station and fill up my car with gas. And I know that the lady who lived down the street from me loves Mountain Dew. She would stand out on her porch and drink a 2-liter of Mountain Dew while she was raising her grandkids. And so the grandkids were at school. And so she'd stand outside and just relax and have her Mountain Dew. So I stopped and got gas one day when I was feeling particularly low. And I saw there was Mountain Dew there. I bought a 2-liter. I pulled up in front of her house. I knocked on the door. I don't know if I had had a conversation with her before this or not, right, but I just knew she drank Mountain Dew. And so I knocked on the door and I just basically said, here, because I didn't have any joy to give her or enthusiasm to give her. I just wanted to I knew that I would feel better if I did this act of kindness. And so I handed her the Mountain Dew, and she kind of looked at me funny and was like, what's this for? And I was like, I don't know.
Just felt it in the moment.
Yeah. As awkward as all get out. And yet I got back into my car and the heaviness was lifted for a few moments. I got to forget about, cancer surgeries and appointments and things like that. And so I really saw the power, the teeth behind intentional kindness during that battle with breast cancer.
It almost is regulating for you.
However, I'll tell you, like a depressed person doesn't want somebody to tell them to get up and go take a walk around the block. I have a kindness team. It's 3 women who help me do what I do. And I went through a really bad bout of depression from January of 2021 through about March, beginning of April. And one of the team members said to me, I know you're feeling low. You should go do an act of kindness. And honestly, I wanted to punch her in the throat. I was, I was like, are you kidding me right now? Because like, you don't know what depression feels like. And
Right.
yeah,
How
but
could you possibly think that, yeah, right. Yeah.
yes. And it did help in those moments to be able to have somebody to say to my husband or whatever, like this cloud is really heavy right now on me. And so sometimes I just had to let people be kind to me.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I've learned very quickly and keep being reminded of this almost every day, especially in the field that we work in, is telling people what they should do never goes well. It just doesn't really go well in terms of, hey, I know what you need. You just need to do that. It is a killer in the mental health world and counseling world where counselors to say, this is what you need to do. I got all the answers for you, figuring it out. So they probably would have been better off saying, you know what, you should never be kind again. And that probably would have worked better because you would at least try to do the opposite.
Or, another thing would be to say, I did an act of kindness on your behalf today. I know you're feeling low. I want to stand in the gap for you. I feel the love. I might not be able to tell them that I feel the love in that moment, but I feel the love.
In doing the podcast and writing your article, what is something that you take from those stories that people have wrote in, or what is something that stands out to you about those stories that helps you kind of further your mission to spread kindness or to encourage kindness as a healing mechanism?
Again and again and again, I see this common thread. It's this: the life you transform with kindness is your own. Kindness isn't about somebody else. It's not about the person that you gave the money to. It's not about the person that you bought the groceries for. It is about you. And so, yes, there are acts of kindness that people have done for us that will stay with us for decades. And that's just, kindness is powerful. When it gets into your brain, it'll stick around for decades, and it becomes a legacy, really. But when people would tell me about some of those acts of kindness that really transformed the way they see people, or the way they dealt with people, or their spot in life at that time, 99% of the time, they were the giver. Mm-hmm. They were the ones who were doing it, and they have no idea what the recipient thought or where the recipient is now, or, it doesn't matter if that life was changed or not, because the life that you transform with kindness is your own. Right. So there's an element of, for people that are maybe new to this or learning about your, podcast for the first time, kindness isn't about necessarily, or isn't dependent on the reaction or acceptance of that kindness. Because even in that moment where the lady who got the Mountain Dew from you wasn't like, jumping up and down, giving you a hug. She was like, this is weird. Why are you doing this? But that's still, you still felt like, a dose of oxytocin from it, or a boost of, happy chemicals, to give you that feeling. Yes, I had the chemical reaction. And I find that primarily if a person wants to, like, what do those happy chemicals feel like? I want to do that. You need to step out of your comfort zone to do an act of kindness. Like making dinner for your family isn't going to produce those feel-good chemicals. But if you make an extra helping of dinner and you take it to, the elderly person who lives down the street that you don't know very well, that can get those chemicals flowing. So it's got to be a little challenging. Yeah. Challenge yourself a little bit. Step outside of the comfort zone just a tiny bit. Well, that is how you change your brain, is you have to move outside of the comfort zone, or you can't. So in terms of kindness being an antidote to things like depression or anxiety or whatever, you're having to push yourself out of a comfort zone to change your brain in the right way. What are other elements to kindness? Like, what does kindness look like? Are there elements to it of what it should entail, or how do people, although it seems like a simple topic, like you said, one thing people wouldn't think about is cooking for your family isn't necessarily the act of kindness that we're talking about. What does it look like?
The other thing what I would hear is like, some of your examples are of buying something for somebody. What do you do if you don't have that availability to buy things for people? What are some of the things that you guys, or you learn about, or you talk about, or examples of how to be kind in a way that anybody can access that?
I heard a singer say once that there is no such thing as a neutral interaction. It's either a positive interaction or a negative interaction. So as we kind of draw that out, let's talk about the clerk at the grocery store. So I go up to the clerk in the grocery store. I'm on my phone. She, takes my groceries and, I slide in my credit card and then I grab my bags and I go. So for me, I might have thought, well, that was a neutral interaction. I wasn't mean to her. I was just doing my thing. She doesn't care. But to her, that would certainly be me ignoring her, right? And so it would be a negative interaction to her. Or, for instance, sometimes, somebody's working at the checkout and they've been on their feet all day and their back hurts and they're a little crabby, and you have more than 12 things in the quick checkout lane or whatever it is.
Right. And
the clerk is just kind of grumpy. And you can think to yourself, I am the customer here, stop giving me attitude, and you can give attitude back. Or you can say, hey, when do you get off? It's a beautiful day. I hope you get a chance to enjoy it today. Or when did you start? Have you been on your feet all day? That has to be really hard. And then you will notice that that other person will kind of pep up a little bit. There is this idea of aping people, meaning that people will mimic other people's reactions. They will reflect you onto themselves. So parody. Yeah. So if you find someone at a hospital clinic, you walk up to the person at the hospital clinic and they say, name, birthday, they're not being mean. They're just getting things done, right?
They're being productive at their job.
Right. This is what they're doing. And so, you can maintain that sort of cold clinical distance from someone, but it's going to feel a little negative when you walk away. You're not going to say, I had a really good experience when I went to the clinic. That was awesome. That person was so nice. So instead of expecting that person to just, see you and be happy about it, somebody says name, birthday, you can say name Nicole, but you can call me anything you want because I'll answer. My husband calls me sweetie, so if you want to call me that, that's fine. Whatever. You make a joke or you smile, and you'll see that as soon as you smile and give that person your eye contact and your time, they're going to parrot you. They're going to mimic what they see in your face.
You're giving them good feeling, and they're taking it, and it rubs off on each other. So I hear everything really being about connection, and I think there's actually some skills that are actually being built, which is empathy, because what you're having to do is really try to put yourself in that other person's shoes to kind of connect to that experience. And so being able to kind of reflect what you think their experience. And then it does even allow for you to be a little bit curious, which I do think takes you away from judgment. So like if going into that and that grumpiness, like what a jerk, your mental model is that what an awful person for being so grumpy, even though we've been grumpy many times in our life. You're asking, I wonder what's going on with this person, to feel this way, or to kind of be grumpy, or to be in this grumpy mood. And so I feel like that is very powerful, because we become less judgmental and more curious and connection focused.
I have a chapter in my book, The Negativity Remedy, that talks about asking questions and creating stories. And so the idea is to build this bridge of compassion with people. Right. And so sometimes We can ask people questions. We get that snippy email. We can just, walk over to their office and say, hey, this didn't sound like you. Is everything okay? And then they have a chance to say, I am so sorry. Like I was up throughout the night last night. It was terrible. So we can ask those questions. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. You're not going to follow them to the gas station and ask them, hey, is everything okay? So in that situation, we're not asking questions. We're creating stories. We're saying, I wonder if that person cut me off in traffic because they're heading to the hospital because their wife just is giving birth. I wonder if that person let the door slam in my face at the store because, she was so intent on trying to remember the list of things that she was supposed to get from the store. It becomes not about you and you being offended or disrespected anymore. It becomes about what might be going on in that person's life.
Yeah. And seeking to understand first and that is a very powerful thing. So you had mentioned being a broadcaster and you talk about suffering from depression and anxiety, but there's probably an impetus to present yourself as not in pain or not struggling and always kind of, I got to give my best face forward. And does that play a role in how you deal with life, not being able to kind of like let people know not let them see you sweat kind of thing, where it's like, I got to put this costume on at all times, and that factoring into your struggles?
I understand 100% what you're saying. And I would say that when I was a television anchor, that was 100% the truth. I showed up in my work life and in my private life at 100%, whether I felt it or not. If I was out in the community, then I wanted to have my makeup on and my hair done and a smile on my face, right?
You couldn't turn it off. You can't turn it off. You're not allowed to turn it off at all.
No, I put it on myself that I wasn't allowed to turn it off. In the last 10 years of dealing with kindness, that has completely changed for me because I realized I can't expect other people to be vulnerable if I'm not going to be vulnerable first. I can't expect, one of the greatest gifts of kindness we can give to people is authenticity. And if I'm not willing to be authentic, then I'm not being kind. Right. And so if someone, I get people who will email me and they'll say, this story in the book is wrong, or you said this in one chapter and you said that in a different book. And, I heard you speak about this and that wasn't nice. And so if I get an email like that, I'll send them my phone number and say, hey, call me, let's talk about this, because
Right.
I really believe that I have an obligation to be authentic with people. And so that's why I don't mind talking about, struggles with drinking, or depression or, what else do you want to know? I'll tell you, I don't care, because that's how we can be kind to each other.
Does that create more comfort in being able to, you think, to engage with people if we kind of present ourselves as vulnerable? Because one of the people I follow and do learn a lot from is Brene Brown, and she talks about vulnerability, and really vulnerability is a key in just about any elements of success that we try to achieve. If we're not vulnerable, then that actually hinders our ability to be successful. And so I can imagine that if you're always performing per se as that public persona, there's an element of people probably feeling that as a performance and not able to feel genuine connection from that.
Right. We have to be authentic and vulnerable for people to genuinely connect with us. 100%. Yes.
And that's a hard thing to get people to do. Right. And so even being kind, it's like, those issues come up of trying to be vulnerable or, I guess part of that vulnerability could be, I'm going to be kind, and there might be a negative reaction to that kindness.
Well, what I think I see it the most actually is when people don't want to accept kindness, whether it's me or somebody else. I had a woman who took my son to school while I was traveling before COVID, before the quarantine. So she would make sure my son got to school all the time. Well, Then something happened in her life and I ended up being home, and I said, let me take your son to school every day. And she was like, no, 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 no. That's just, it's too much. It's too much. And it's almost like I see it in women a lot. We feel like we have to wear this badge that says, I've got this under control. I can do this. And so that's where I think we're not being authentic or vulnerable with each other when we say, like, you know what, I would love it if you would take my kid. Like, thank you. You know, that would be really good. Or can you please come and hold my baby today? Because I just feel like I need to take a nap and I cannot with the screaming child, you know, or whatever that might be. To be willing to say, yeah, I would love your help, and not having to worry about paying it back at another time. Like, just take that off the equation altogether and just let it be an act of kindness that somebody wants to give to you, and be weak enough to say yes.
So accepting kindness is not a recognition of your character trait of being helpless. Like, doesn't mean anything. It is just you're accepting kindness because you're willing and strong enough to accept support and say to people, yes, I could really use that.
Allowing people to see your weakness. You know, your weakness isn't going to be your weakness forever. It is your weakness right now. It's your weakness today.
Does it ever get to a point or where your listeners or the people or just even your own personal experience with being kind to where it turns into feeling like a responsibility? Or is there, you know, because I would imagine that's not the intent, is to make it feel like a job, but it's something that we're doing because it's good for us. And
what a great question for today for me, because at the end of May, I am going on a sabbatical. So I have been writing books and doing blog posts and doing the podcast and, you know, the column, all of these things, along with speaking and trying to be a kind person for 10 years. And it just kind of came to my understanding at some point this spring that it's time for me to step back and kind of quiet all of the voices, including my own, so that I can just listen and I can learn and I can feel and I can experience without having to turn around and make it into a lesson, you know, without having to turn around and say, okay, now how can I be kind now? You know, and my team needs it as well. You know, they need that break to be able to just, you know, allow their families to be kind to them and to be kind to their families and to spend the summertime just enjoying themselves. So I am going to shut down all of our social media. I'm not writing. I'm not for public consumption. I'm not writing or anything like that. And so, you know, the act of kindness itself, when it brings you delight, that's when I call it kindness.
Yeah.
When it's something you have to do, well, then it's a duty, then it's your job, right? And so for me, I want to get back to that feeling of just this great delight in kindness. And so that is going to require a little bit of a shutdown. And I don't think that's bad for people to shut down every once in a while and say, I'll be right back.
Right. So it takes the pressure off a little bit to kind of regroup, get inspired again, or just kind of find a different focus or kind of approach to the same mission?
Well, I have a really strong faith. And so for me, it's a matter of feeling like God has a purpose for me and for all of us. And so when I get confused about that purpose, I know that I need to hear his voice again. And so for me, it's a matter of saying like, okay, let's shut everything down and just take some quiet time and just see what might be next. And it is super scary for me because, you know, the podcast was just rated like number 3 of Oprah's top happiness podcasts. I mean, like, right. Things are going well. So to take this time now and say, this is the time when I'm going to shut it down and be quiet is scary, totally scary. And yet I know that if I want to be able to continue to give people my best and to live out my purpose, I have to have quiet time for myself.
And that does take a lot of strength to be able to say, despite maybe people wanting more and more and more, I gotta be strong enough to say no, because if I give you more, it's not going to be what I want, right? What you're talking about is kindness to yourself right now. So is there elements that you focus on in terms of kindness to yourself? Is that an element of what you talk about in terms of kindness in general?
So there are people in the world who I really believe their Achilles heel is kindness. And I see it a lot in families with addiction where the addict will need something, and the parent of that addict will continually give and give and give to the demise of whoever else is in the household.
At the expense of someone else, or?
Yeah, you're giving them your food, you're giving them your money, you're giving them whatever. And sometimes we can look at that and we can say, but that's kindness. And Nicole told me I should be kind. And so I'm like, whoa, hold the phone on that one, because kindness doesn't take more than you can give. Mm-hmm. Kindness doesn't leave you up in the middle of the night wondering, like, should I have done that? Like, because now I don't have enough to feed my family, right? That's not kind. And so setting healthy boundaries to me is kindness. And for me, those boundaries, no, social media has got to be one of those boundaries for me. I've got to say, okay, I'm going to hop off of that for a while. Knowing how many speaking engagements I'm going to do, or how much time I'm going to spend doing volunteer work or whatever, anything, because these things that are so good might be things we want to say yes to, but they might not be our very best yes. Because when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So when you can create those kind of boundaries and those margins in your life, I think that allows you the space to be kind to yourself. You are being kind to yourself when you occasionally have to say no to somebody.
Well, and we use the analogy of, the plane loses oxygen and the mask drop. You have to put the mask on yourself first before you help somebody else. And in our field, typically, the way we try to deal with our mental health struggles is to help others. We just want to focus on everybody else, and then we fall apart. Eventually it catches up. It maybe has benefit in the beginning, but like you said, we're giving more than we have, and that deteriorates. Now, that doesn't mean that we're, turned to mean or indifference. It just means we have to kind of recognize what we can do and what we need to do for ourselves in order for us to stay healthy. Have you guys, and I know we're hopefully pulling out of COVID to a certain degree, but COVID has probably limited, especially in certain areas of the country, our ability to be kind because we've been so isolated and socially disconnected because of the physical distance that we've had to have. Has there been any discussions or ideas in terms of if we are in situations like that where we're not necessarily around a bunch of people to be able to be kind?
I was so overjoyed at the way people reacted to the initial quarantine, because there were all of these, people would put hearts on their windows. They would put teddy bears in their windows for others to drive around and see. People would leave notes for their UPS man on the inside of their door, like, hey, thanks so much for this. Or they'd leave little hand sanitizers and things like that. So people got very creative when it came to kindness during the quarantine. What I see coming out of the quarantine is that people have forgotten a little bit how to really connect with others, because we've had these masks on our face. Yeah. So, we don't have to smile at each other in the grocery store because nobody can see it anyway. We don't have to say hi. We can just pass by without even making eye contact. It's like we're our own little individual pods. And so what I'm hoping is that as we come out of this quarantine, that people will step out of their comfort zone, and begin to just really see the people that are in front of them. So we're not having negative interactions and we're not having neutral interactions. Again, we're going back to those positive interactions.
Where would people start? Okay, they're going to watch this and they're going to be like, well, this seems really interesting, and kindness seems like, but I don't even know where to start. What would you recommend, and how would you get people started down this kindness journey?
Here it is. Number one, think about what you're thinking about. That's it. Think about what you're thinking about. And in fact, I even ask people, take your phone, put an alert in there every week, every Thursday at 3 p.m. What am I thinking about? Because really, in order to have the brain space to be kind to others and to notice ways in which you could be kind or ways in which people are being kind to you, it requires to kind of remove some of the clutter, the negative clutter from our brains. And so when I first began on this kindness mission, it was really important that I stopped to think about what I was thinking about. And then when I realized, like, wow, I am standing here looking in the mirror, just thinking about how terrible I look in this t-shirt and shorts, I would say, I reject that thought. And so immediately just say, I'm out. That is not a thought that is serving me. And so it's almost as if you're starting by being kind to yourself. You're thinking about what you're thinking about. You're rejecting those negative thoughts. And for me, I replaced it. And I like to encourage people to replace it with a mantra, a quote, a poem, something that is really meaningful to them that they want to memorize. Mm-hmm. And so I had 9 words I wrote down on a piece of paper that I kept in my pocket. And they were love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Now, I'm terrible at memorizing, so I wrote them down on a piece of paper, put them in my pocket. And when I would have those negative thoughts, those judgmental thoughts, the thoughts of worry or fear, I would think to myself, I reject that thought. And then I would think love, joy, peace, patience. And then I'd forget the rest of them. So I'd pull out my piece of paper, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And so by the time you're done memorizing that rigmarole and looking at your piece of paper, you've forgotten what your judgmental thought about yourself or anybody else was in the first place. When we think about what we're thinking about, when we can brush out some of that negativity, we can see the world through new eyes and less judgment. And therefore that opens up the world of kindness to us.
Yeah. So some self-awareness to kind of pay attention to yourself and what you're experiencing and doing, and then inject something that can be strength building or encouraging or supportive to yourself in an act of kindness. Yeah, I like that idea. Because I think we often are walking around on autopilot, and that's where we have to snap out of our autopilot, because we're going to fly into a mountain if we don't.
Yes, that is it. That's exactly it. Like, get yourself off of autopilot so you can see the kindness around you. Yes.
This has been a great discussion. I really enjoy learning about kind of these acts of kindness and getting your perspective on that, because I think there's a great need right now for compassion and understanding of others. And I think kindness is a great way to accomplish that. Because I think you brought up a really important point, which is to be kind, you have to really be thoughtful about what other people are experiencing in that moment, so you can be attuned to what's going on in the world, and stop being so hard on yourself. So I know you're going on sabbatical. So where could people learn more about your stuff, or what if you could review the books that you have out again that people could look for? We'll try to send links in our media stuff as well.
The website will stay up. So
Okay.
that's NicoleJPhillips.com. So NicoleJPhillips.com. And then the books are all on Amazon, but I also have links to them on the website. But the books I have 2 books that are stories of kindness, and that's Kindness is Contagious and Kindness is Courageous. And then I have one book that's kind of more of a how-to guide, I guess you could say, and that's called The Negativity Remedy. And if a person says, well, I can only buy one, or I can only read one, read The Negativity Remedy, please, because that's the one that can really have some concrete tools. I'm all about practical advice while also, hopefully being a little fun to read or entertaining. But It has really concrete tips in there. So you can even go to your library and ask them to order it, and they will, they'll get it. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. And thank you for making time available before you go on sabbatical. I appreciate you accepting our request to have you on. I know that you're getting ready to decompress. So
it is an honor. It is absolutely an honor. Thank you for what you're doing to help people.